I think it's common knowledge that many of the veterans who are returning from service in Afghanistan and Iraq need help readjusting to civilian life. But what's not common knowledge is the uh, unique difficulties that women service people are having when they come back. And so that's what this show is going to be about. And here to talk to us about this is Eli Painted Crow, who spent 22 years in the Army, and also with us is Nadia McCaffrey. She's a Gold Star mother, and she's starting veterans villages around the country where soldiers who are trying to readjust to civilian life can learn to do that with their comrades. So thank you both for being here, Eli and
Thank
Nadia
you.
again. Yeah. So Eli, tell us why you're so concerned and active about helping women soldiers in general, but women soldiers in particular.
Well, what I'm really finding, I've been home since about 2005 or 6, I can't remember, but in my own process of obtaining help, I really found how difficult it was to ask for help and literally have to demand help, and what services have not been available because when people thought of veterans, they mostly thought of men.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't think about a female vet very often, and so the systems were not designed to really be more, as far as female vets goes, more than maybe like women's health services, pap smear, mammogram kind of thing, and really did not have services that reach a whole lot beyond that. And in coming home, what I really found was that there was nobody there. There was nobody there to support me. There was nobody. I had to really fight, and I learned a lot of hard lessons. And so the other thing that has come up in the last, it's always been there, but now it's talked about, is military sexual trauma, and that's something that is also a very, very big issue and has not been given a lot of attention to by the VA or by the government. In that military sexual trauma is actually not seen as a disability at this point, and a lot of claims are being denied, even when there's proof attached to it.
What do you mean by military sexual trauma?
Well, military sexual trauma can be, sort of defined as, sexual harassment, physical assaults, things of that nature. And it is really prevalent in, people seem to, there's a book out called The Lonely Soldier, and it talks about it being very prevalent, in Iraq and Afghanistan, but really it's prevalent on every post. And it's something that many women have been silenced to talk about if they want to keep their career, if they don't want to rock the boat, if they don't want to find themselves in some kind of punitive.
So what happens to a woman if she feels that she's forced into silence?
Well, a lot of the times they come home. Suicide is an option. Alcohol and drug use. A lot of depression. A lot of different kinds of symptoms that make it really very hard for women to readjust into civilian life.
Right. And what is the incidence of this?
Well, they say something like 90%. MST happens to 90% of women, either through sexual harassment.
MST happens to 90%?
Yeah.
Of women veterans?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about also like having to deal with sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Things being said that are not okay, and you have to kind of put up with that. They're saying 1 in 3 women are affected by MST.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty high number.
Yeah. And rape is a problem too.
Absolutely. Absolutely a problem. Women have sort of a double jeopardy because they have to be aware of where they are in combat or where they are serving, and they have to be aware of their counterparts.
Right. So you've had some personal experience with this, I think. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but when you tried to get help, what was it like to go to the VA?
Well, I can actually share a little incident that happened back in February of 2009. I have been diagnosed with PTSD, with depression, with quite a few things. And I actually, if I'm not on medication to get up and to go to bed, I I really have a hard time functioning sometimes, and so I had not taken my medication for quite some time. You get tired of taking it, I ended up in a psychiatric ward for a couple of days, and the treatment I endured there actually was re-traumatizing in that the services that were available were not available really to women. They were available to men, and they stuck me in an all-male ward. And I also had to share a latrine with another male who, urinated all over the place or, left his clothes there.
So how blind and insensitive can they be?
And even trying to form a complaint is also very often dismissed by the staff, because there's really an attitude that we need to accept what's there, and we need to be grateful that we get it.
Good. Nadia, how would your Veterans Villages help what Ellie is talking about?
Well, that's the idea from the beginning of the vision of the concept of Veterans Village. I mean, we are very much oriented toward families, for families of veterans, but also for women, single mother who have returned. Many people who have returned from the war who were married before being deployed happen to be divorced today. Very few couples have remained. And why? Because there is nothing for families. There is nothing to help out a family of veterans. And you know the problem. If the person, the husband has been deployed, for example, coming back home with his family is not going to solve anything. The family is not going to understand what he is going through. Nobody has been in his boots. And if there is not any organization to facilitate the return of a soldier home that way with his family, so will be everybody will be part of the reintegration.
Right.
And it doesn't exist yet.
Now you've been going around the country talking about your dream of starting a Veterans Village, and I think you've made a major breakthrough in Minnesota, is it?
Minnesota, yes, we have a huge campus there. We haven't bought it yet, but people are starting to raise money for the purpose of buying.
And it's a grand, magnificent place.
It's absolutely breathtaking, yeah.
And the people responsible for this are really sincere and really encourage you in what you're doing.
Actually, the owner of the school is working with us, with me, and this is his wish. He wants this to happen. He's selling the campus for $3.5 million. It's worth like $45 million.
I've seen pictures of it.
Yes.
It's almost like the White House grounds multiplied several times.
It's amazing.
And there'll be a facility specifically for women.
From the start, when I saw this, I said, okay, here we are. We need to have a whole building for women, veteran, and single mother, veteran.
Right.
So it's in progress. We're going to have that, yes.
Right. Okay, so Ellie, the Veterans Administration is really not set up to help women at this moment.
Well, I know that they're really working on it, and every time I bring up something, they're like, okay, that's a really good idea, or, they really try to address it. But we also have to realize, you may hear, like, some VAs have some real extraordinary kinds of services, but you're going to find them in big cities. I live in Merced County. I have to travel an hour to the nearest hospital, VA hospital. And so, 40% of soldiers come from rural communities, and these soldiers are not getting the services that they require. And actually, soldiers don't really know that they can ask for services outside of the VA. There's so many things that young soldiers coming home don't realize that they can ask for, or if the system becomes so cumbersome after their first experience, they decide they're just not going to do it. Many soldiers think that the VA is part of the military and don't realize that is a civilian entity, and that you have a right to make requests and you have a right to appeal things. And it's very disheartening when I talk to a young vet or even an older vet, and they say, yeah, I went there once. A Vietnam vet told me the other day, yeah, I went there once, walked in, walked out. They couldn't help me, and I just never went back.
Right.
So if this guy's been dealing with PTSD for 30 years, and it's happening to young soldiers now. If there's not somebody to actually help them get through the process, they give up very quickly, very quickly. And my concern is, soldiers come back with injuries, but the rate of suicide is very high, and so we can't expect the VA to help our veterans. It's going to be up to communities. It's going to be up to our families. It's going to be up to friends who can have to educate themselves on how to deal with returning soldiers, how to deal with some of the issues that are happening to this soldier when they're home, and what kind of readjustment period needs to happen, and how can they best support it. Because of that soldier really wants to do is push everybody away and say, leave me alone. And that's the last thing we need to do. But because we don't know what to do, very often many soldiers end up committing suicide because they are so isolated and nobody knows how to approach them.
And you and Nadia are prime examples of people who have seen clearly what the problem is and have been a little bit frustrated with the organization, the system as it is, and has done something and has put energy in to get something done on your own. Now, what organizations are you with that you'd like to talk about?
There's a couple organizations. One is called Service Women Action Network, and acronym is SWAN. And basically what we're doing right now through SWAN is we've started up a project called Claiming Justice. And Claiming Justice is actually bringing awareness about military sexual trauma, bringing awareness of how the VA is currently handling that situation, and actually bringing voice to creating change for women who are applying for claims for MST, military sexual trauma. There have been incidents where women have come forward and reported it and have had actually evidence and still have been denied the claim. And so that is a big deal for us, and we really, really need to be supported in creating that change so that this can be looked upon as a disability, and so that women may get help for it.
And I think you've also started something called Turtle Women Rising.
Yeah, well, Turtle Women Rising sort of came around because I joined the peace movement, and what I really found is that it wasn't all that peaceful.
Why not?
Well, going back to language, people seem to misinterpret anti-war movement as being a peaceful action, and that's not my understanding of peace. Anything that's against something is certainly not peace. So I really tried hard to be part of that movement, and I became very frustrated because I could feel the anger of groups and pointing fingers and judging and blaming. And it's not to say that people shouldn't be held accountable for the things they've done, but that really doesn't serve us in what we're trying to do and move forward, to stand there and blame this person or that person and just do things that are to me seem aggressive. I just felt like it wasn't really getting us anywhere, and it was actually dividing lines with people who agree that change needed to happen, but were not necessarily anti-war. So I started an organization called Turtle Women Rising, and it was an indigenous-led group by Native American women, or Native to Indigenous women, period. And we took a drum to Washington, D.C., and we drummed up there for 4 days and 4 nights, and held space for veterans and recognized the veterans out there every night, the ones who, with TAPS and veterans serving, and offered them a redefinition of what it is to be a warrior.
Right. And what does the drum beat symbolize for you?
The drum is actually, the story of the drum is actually, there's a few native stories, legends around that, and the drum symbolizes the heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of the earth. And so the women made a drum to give to the men so that they could understand life, so they could understand the heartbeat of giving life, because men can't, birth. And so we took that. It's also very healing for the mother. It's a vibration, and the higher the vibration, the more healing can happen around the earth and around people's hearts. And when you get around a drum, or you get a group of people who are sitting in the same room, what naturally happens is our heartbeats sort of sync. So the drum sort of does the same thing. And so we had an international event. People from all over the world came to this event, and it was a very huge healing process for many veterans who are today still calling and emailing and say, Ellie, when's your next event?
Right.
So it's sort of a way to bring spirit into the healing process without a whole lot of language, because the drum is a language of its own.
How do you see Nadia's group as being spirit into the healing process?
Well, I think what Nadia is bringing into as far as Veterans Village, she is like a shining example of community stepping up to realizing that, vets, they went there to, they served to support their family, to support their country, to support their community, and coming home, they need to be receiving that same kind of, support. That same kind of community of embracing, even if it feels hard at the moment. Nadia really understands the need for families and how families are impacted by that returning soldier's, what he or she had to go through out there, and it impacts family, and it's something that we don't talk about, and we need to talk about, because that trauma is just going to move on into our families, or it's going to break up families. So what Nadia is putting out there for women veterans, I'm a stand for that, and she has my total support in that. And what she's doing with Veterans Village is needs to happen. It needs to happen, and people, I invite the community to step up and be part of this healing process in that way.
Yeah. Nadia, how does it feel to be supported?
It feels wonderful, of course.
Yeah, by such an articulate spokesman.
Yes,
yeah.
She is.
So, yeah. So, Ellie, you said that you talked about Western medicine and how soldiers come from many cultures. And because of that, alternative forms of medicine should be offered to them, but often in conjunction with Western medicine. Would you tell us what you mean by this?
Well, first of all, my first experience in going to the VA and being given just like dozens of medication to sort of suppress my anger, suppress my aggressiveness.
How did that feel to be given medication?
Well, I think that there's a T-shirt that's around the VA that you say this veteran is medicated for your protection, and I think there's some validity to that. I have to come back and be in the world, and I have to be able to go into that supermarket and be cordial with the clerk and deal with whatever frustrations I'm having at that moment, or in traffic. And so this medication process is like really overwhelming, because they give it to you, you sleep, it takes you days to adjust to it. And it really affects the body and the mind, in terms of maybe you get to sleep, when you haven't slept for a few days. But it doesn't really address issues of the spirit, and ceremony. Indigenous people understand the drum, for example, and the ceremony around that, and the meaning around that. And there are so many ceremonies that can happen to help heal that spirit, because when you're out in places like that, your spirit can be fragmented, and you can leave pieces here and there from the trauma. Your parts of your spirit can actually just leave your body, and you have to call it back, and you have to be in care of yourself, and in an awareness of that. And many indigenous cultures know this and understand that, and because it's not really something that's talked about, religion is often confused with spirituality in a lot of this Western society. So it's not something that's really talked about in hospitals or in clinics, yet vets talk about it amongst each other.
Now that we're on the subject, what does the military do to your spirit?
Well, I spent 22 years in the military, and I actually was a drill sergeant for 6 of those years. 3 of those years I was a drill sergeant for basic trainees coming in, and the other 3 I was a drill sergeant for cadets, people who wanted to be drill sergeants.
Right.
And I can tell you that, if you think about language and how powerful the word is, there is an exercise that you go through in basic training, and in this exercise, they call it a spirit de corps, and it's like to bring this unity of this cohesiveness together of this company, or this squad or whatever. And so they call it spirit de corps, but there's also this practice that when they connect that word, spirit de corps, they're connecting it to an exercise in which you are fixing your bayonets, and you are learning how to put it together, and how to stand with it, and how to stab through a tire or through a bale of hay, and you're yelling kill, 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 blood, blood, blood. And so when you're yelling this, you're literally transmuting your spirit into whatever you showed up with. Any kind of gentleness, any kind of compassion sort of has to leave you, because in order for you to think kill, 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 blood, 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 you sort of have to have the spirit of hatred. You have to have that spirit of anger. You have to have that spirit of, cohesiveness and loyalty that goes beyond what you might consider that you would like set a limit for. I can be loyal up to here, and the loyalty there really changes and brainwashes you basically.
Mm-hmm. So Nadia, after hearing this, that people, returning soldiers come back with kind of a foreign spirit put into them, maybe a spirit of hate or a spirit of aggressiveness.
Aggressiveness, yes.
Then what you're doing helps, one, to separate them from society.
Mm.
It puts them in a natural environment. It puts them with their colleagues. And how else could it help them?
Well, the return is first home, and then many times end up to the VA for some programs. But once the program is over, there is nothing to pick up from there. Mm-hmm. And this is what we pretend to do. We will have a place, permanent place for some veteran and family to stay at and work. And we also will have some training programs. We're going to have a large farm. Mm-hmm. For example, in Minnesota, it's going to have 240 acres of land to go with it. So this is going not just to supply the kitchen of the center, but will be sold to the next town and cities. So it's going to be the secret of the whole vision is to be completely self-sustained. Mm-hmm. From power to food to energy, everything has to be right there. And teach people how to survive and to be friendly with the earth, to really understand our roots. We have lost that.
Right.
If you take a person and give this person 1 acre and something, a shovel, as water in it, how many people are going to survive?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Eli, we talked a bit about this before, and you said this society teaches us how we are wrong so that we can aspire to someone else's definition of what is right. I find that rather profound. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I mean, if you think about your kids when they're in school, and you get a call when your child does something wrong. That's when the teacher calls you. The kid who's taking a test is going to get a red check mark over everything that they do wrong. They don't give you a green check mark for everything you do right. So early on, you're really teaching your child how you're not good enough and how you have to strive to be good enough, whatever that may mean. And so very early on, children really learn that they have to compete, and that you have to succeed, and you have to be in a hurry, and you have to, be the best, and you have to be the first. And so all of these pressures, really put you in this place of not feeling good enough.
So when a soldier comes back, they're not feeling good enough as it is, because they're filled with this foreign rage that's been put into them. And hence, a way station like Nadia's Veterans Village is a place where they need to go to heal before they can reintegrate back in. They have to go to a place where they're considered a little bit right.
Yeah, well, you come back and you're wrong about everything. So, and that's just that sense you feel. Nobody really even has to say that to you, and it's for every soldier it's different. Some soldiers feel very proud. Some soldiers feel like they can actually, work through it. Some soldiers cannot. Yeah. And what Nadia is talking about, to me, is a very spiritual experience, because working on the earth, you're working with the elements. Indigenous people understand the spirit of the water, the spirit of the fire, the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the air, and all of those things are a healing process that you can't get through any medication.
Right. You've said that in this culture there's a disconnect between the heart and thinking.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in just the walk that I have is that, I've worked with many professors, and when I talk about prayer, or I talk about intention, or I talk about, anything that talks about, where your heart space is, there's a lot of conflict in that. If they can't analyze it, if they can't see it, this world has a real big disconnect because our hearts, we really don't, our hearts are about relationships. Our is about making time, making space, and making this connection. But we're on email, we're on texting, we're on phone calls. And so we're always constantly feeding information to our heads, and we really don't have time to be.
Right.
You know, and being is really puts us in our heart place. We're always doing, and we're not human doings, we're human beings, but we don't practice that anymore.
Right.
And I think what Nadia is doing allows for vets and their families to be and
Right.
find that heart space.
Yeah. At some point in your military career, you, I think, felt that being in the military was akin to being a warrior, and then at some point you realized that's not true. What to you is a warrior?
Well, you know, Sitting Bull's quote.
Tell us. We've got about a minute left.
Yeah,
Tell us.
okay. Well, Sitting Bull's quote is, it talks about, you know, the warriors are not people who go around killing because we don't have a right to kill. A warrior is someone who protects the defenseless, who protects the elderly, who protects, you know, the weak, and mostly protects our children for the next 7 generations, for humanity. We're in a mode of protecting and not defending. So there's a big difference between being a warrior and being a soldier. I really learned that. I got that.
Right. So you feel you're a warrior because you're supporting life.
Yes, I'm here to protect the soldiers that are coming home.
Good. Well, I'd like to thank you both for being here. You're both warriors in the best sense of the word. And so I think you've made your points very, very well. And once again, I'd like to thank the audience for tuning into this. And I think that some things we've talked about here can really resonate with you. And one question you might want to ask yourselves is, am I a warrior? Am I willing to defend the helpless? Am I willing to defend and provide the best kind of care for people who really need help? And to do that, I think you have to ask yourself, are you sensitive to the issues that other people are going through, both men and women, warriors who are returning from Iraq and Afghanistan? So I'd like to encourage you to think about that and think about what you can do. So thank you for watching the show. And again, thank you, Nadia and Eli, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.